Okay, when I started out with portable style antennas, field style antennas, which is basically all I do because I can't keep anything up permanently, I needed a way of getting my antennas into the air. And if you followed me for any length of time, you know that I've got a bit of a thing for fiberglass antennas, and I've got quite a collection. I maybe need to do another video on that. It's been a long time since I've covered that. But one of the problems that I actually found was predominantly we're doing this hobby on our own. We can't rely on someone's help. We're working in small spaces, small yards, gardens. So how do we actually take our fiberglass mast pole, actually, make sure it's secure and actually get it up into the air? So I looked at a number of methods, and I've basically come up with a hybrid that I use, and I've not seen anyone quite do it the way that I do it. So I've taken influence from various sources, but probably the biggest influence I've taken from is Tracy from Outdoors on the Air. So he made a video a number of years ago, and that video went pretty viral within the amateur radio community. And he used some sort of, I think it was, we call it PVC pipe, plumbing pipe, quite big diameter. And he basically used straps, and he basically guyed that to the ground, and then he took his pole and plunked it in. And I thought that was a really good idea, and I started to go down that path and use that, but I actually stopped, and I thought, well, why do I actually need that PVC pipe? Why can't I just use the pole itself? And that's exactly what I did. Now, I've had a number of comments from people over the years telling me, oh, you shouldn't do that, you're crushing the pipe, and that'll make sense when you see it in a bit. But I've been using this method for over 5 years, probably put it up hundreds of times, and I've not had one failure yet. If you do this correctly, it will work. So the purpose of this is to actually basically help you if you're new to the hobby, if you've been in a wee while, how do you actually guy your mast? How do you put it up single-handedly? So the first thing that we need to do is we need to prepare our pole. And in this case, I'm using a new pole to me. It's a DX Commander 12.4. If you've had a spider beam, a 12 meter, similar to that, very slightly heavier duty. It's a little bit heavier pole and ever so slightly longer, but not by much, maybe 20 centimeters or so. So we need to prepare the pole. And what do we need to do to prepare the pole? Well, what I'm going to use is some nitrile rubber, which I bought a piece of sheet on eBay. Nitrile's, it's really hard wearing. It lasts a long time. So I think the sheet I got was 3 millimeters thick, and I've cut that into sections. So I've cut that 50 by 25 by 3, or in old money that would be 2 inch by 1 inch by 1/8 of an inch, or thereabouts. It doesn't need to be exact. And we're basically going to put those round about the pole, and then round about those we're going to use something called a Jubillee clip, or a hose clip, hose clamp, whatever you want to call it. Now I use stainless steel Jubillee clips. I'll put a link to everything down in the description that you're actually going to need to use. I get them from a company here in the UK, and they're really inexpensive. I think they're around about £1 each, $1, maybe even less than that. I think it's an industrial supplier, so they're quite inexpensive. Now, the reasoning I'm using 2 is because it's the old adage is 2 is 1 and 1 is none, something like that. So really, it's about minimizing the failure points. So down from the cap of the pole, you basically put your nitrile rubber, and then you put your Jubillee clamps over the top of that, and then you spread out the rubber, and then you basically tighten up the Jubillee clips. Now, I can't stress this enough, do not over tension these. You just want to tighten these up until the slack is out of them. Any more and you'll damage the pole, okay? So do not over tighten these. And the way that the stress is going to work on this is when you think about it, when the pole's being pulled this way, it's also getting pulled that way. It's also getting pulled in another direction. So the forces are actually shared, if you think about that. So we're not damaging the pole in any way, shape or form. So there's a fine line. Do not over tighten it, but do not have it loose. As long as you cannot move that Jubillee clip by hand, that is good, all right? So you'll feel when the Jubillee clip starts to bite. Then what we need to do is we need to put a couple of loops of string through. So I'm using Mastrant M rope, 2 millimeter. This is a crazy breaking strength. I think actually, if I have a look, which I grab it here, I think it's something, so there's a breaking strength of 484 pounds. So what's that? That's over 100 kilos, well over 100 kilos. And I like to use 2. Again, 2 is 1, 1 is none. So I use 2 of these the same length. So if something happens and breaks, there's always one of these would actually be enough. You need to make sure actually on your Jubillee clips that on the edges there's no rough edges that could perhaps cut the rope. So I tie a little loop onto there, and once we've got that all done, that's our mast prepared. Then what we need to do is we need to then go and put it outside. Now, instead of extending the pole and putting it up, which I find quite unwieldy, and you may not have a garden that's big enough to do that, I like to mount my pole at the top of the bottom section and then just extend the pole up. There's a knack to it, but if you do it a few times, you'll get it no problem at all, and you'll do it reasonably quick. So what we're going to need for this is I use a piece of plywood. It's actually 2 pieces that are screwed together, and I've used a hole saw to put a hole through the middle. If you don't have a hole saw, it doesn't need to be accurate. Use a jigsaw, coping saw, whatever you need to hand to basically put a hole that's bigger than the base of your mast. And the purpose from this is, if you get wind loading at the top, it's not going to kick it out from the side. I've got 4 holes in that base, but I only ever use 2. You don't need any more. So I put my plywood base on the ground with the centre of the hole where the pole's going to be, and I put 2 tent pegs. Now these tent pegs are no ordinary tent pegs, they are galvanised tent pegs. I buy them on eBay, and the more you buy, the cheaper they are. But they're not overly expensive, and I've used these to great effect. And typically, usually I can push these in the ground with just my foot, and you ain't going to pull these out, all right? So you need to space these out. Along with that, I personally use Mastrant P 4mm rope, and I put a little loop at one end, which I actually hook that round the tent peg once it's in the ground, and these are 1.4 meters long each, so I'd say that's probably a minimum. Don't go much more than that because you want them a little bit out from your pole. So I basically hook on my ropes, bring them across into the middle so they're sitting in the middle. So when I'm standing there, I can just basically pick them down and pick up each rope. Then I need something called a Clamcleat. So these are, I think, CL276s. Again, I'll link them down in the description. These are a fantastic little gadget, absolutely rock solid, and again, not expensive. You get different sizes depending on the size of rope that you're actually using. So there's a knack to doing this as well, so you need to watch carefully. So I basically, as I say, I bring up my rope, I take the rope, I put it through one side make sure one side, you'll see this in the video, put it through one side, I then loop it through the pole, through the loop, I then bring it back, I then put it through the Clamcleat again, and then I just tie a little loop. It doesn't need to be anything, it just needs to stop it coming out, and then you're able to tension up that Clamcleat. I then do the same on rope number 2 and rope number 3. And once you've done that, get it roughly where you want it to be, then you need to look at your pole and see how level it is, how straight it is. And then sometimes I actually just use a spirit level if I'm here at the house, and I just put that against it, like you're maybe building a fence. And I can actually, that's the great thing about the Clamcleats, you can actually adjust them, just loosen them off, tighten it up, and then you can actually, get your pole absolutely straight. So that's, but make sure that there's enough tension on that. And from there on in, you can effectively do what you want. You'll notice sometimes it can be difficult actually getting the centre section of the pole up. So sometimes I'll use like a little piece of wire if there's a hoop, if there's like a little loop at the end of your pole that you can just pull it up. Sometimes I'll just use something that's straight, say like the spider beam and it's just the straight pole. I'll just put something on, put a little tension on it and then pull it up. If you're going to be guying for any length of time, more than a couple of hours, and there's going to be any sort of wind at all, then you need to guy further up. I use the spider beam guy belts. They're simple, they're cheap. But you can make your own, maybe out of a bit chopping board or a bit nylon. but you need to think about that, how you're actually going to do your antenna. Typically I'm using vertical antennas, but depending on how complex it is, you know, it's all about you. I've done this to suit my style of operating and the antennas that I'm using, but I've used it for 5 years. There's maybe quicker ways to do it, but I like doing it this way, and as I say, it's gone without a hitch. Taking it down is even quicker. You know, it's a fraction of the time. Literally 5 minutes, I can have this thing completely down on the ground. One thing I forgot to mention to you, there's a special type of tape out there, and it's called Coroplast tape. I didn't find this, I read about this. So a guy named Rick, I can't remember his call sign. I think it's DJ0IP. I hope I've got that right. I'll put a link in the, I'll put it on screen if I've got that wrong. But this Coroplast tape is not the same as normal insulating tape, and it's got a different adhesive. And if you use normal electrical tape on your fiberglass pole, you can actually strip that gloss coating off it, and I've done that. Not done it on the spider beams, but I've done it on some cheaper poles. Because this has a different adhesive, you can actually use it on the joins of your pole, and so tape them on, tape the joins as you're putting it up, and you'll find that your pole won't collapse. So that's actually a really good tip. It's not the easiest to get this stuff. I buy it on Amazon, and I buy these little rolls. I think they're only about 3 meters each, but you don't need a lot, and you can buy like a pack of colors, and I found that that's the cheapest way to buy Coroplast tape. So it's always something good to have if you're putting up antennas. As I say, taking the antenna down, it literally takes me 5 minutes. I make sure all the ropes are neat, so when I put it up again, everything goes up as sweet as a nut. Right guys, hopefully that's been of some help to you. If you have fiberglass poles, you've maybe been a bit worried how you're going to put them up, how you're going to deploy them. As I say, I've just taken influences from different sources, and I've put my my stamp on it to get a solution that works for me. 73 guys, all the best. Catch you in the next one. Bye for now.